Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure today to introduce Rachel Niven and Jenny Chalmers. My name is Will McClellan from Assurity, and of all the talks, this one for me personally strikes closest to home. I don't know how many of you from Christchurch I am, but I think this is going to be really fascinating because we all know what's gone on down there, and delivering projects is hard enough, but delivering them when you're under the spotlight, I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what Rachel and Jenny have achieved. By way of introduction, lead presenter Jenny is the Programme Manager for Canterbury Recovery. Jenny will speak about the strategy and transformation required to implement the technology solution HiViz, capable of effectively supporting the operational response of IAG New Zealand in response to obviously the catastrophic Canterbury earthquake. Jenny's co-presenter Rachel was the project manager for HiViz, certified PMP professional and Agile coach. Rachel's expertise is centred around empowering teams to deliver fit-for-purpose IT solutions. And Rachel will be speaking about the operational side of the transformation, the Agile approach that was used, and the tools and values that made it a success. Please welcome them.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. So, as Will said, I'm Jenny Chalmers and I'm Canterbury Recovery Program Manager. And what we're going to talk about today has got a couple of focuses. One is around innovation and the other one is around the digital transformation. And when we were pondering what did this really mean, what does innovation mean and what does digital transformation mean? Well, last week Rachel and I were at a conference in Sydney and I was lucky enough to attend a masterclass presented by Professor Michael Roseman of the Queensland University of Technology. A really interesting and provocative presentation talking about how we're progressively moving to live in the digital world. And we apologise for our bullet points. If we'd had attended that session last week, we would have had images for all of these, or I would have drawn, although I have to say that my drawing is really appalling. I'm a stick man sort of person. So the sort of concepts that he talked about, major disruption, digital transformation means changing our thinking, living in the digital world or living more in the digital world. We don't know what we don't know. Urgency is critical, speed is critical, we need to innovate. It's data driven, it's all about big data and data analytics. So those were some of his key themes, and he talked about innovation as being a new idea that adds business value and in brackets to our customers. So when I looked at that, I also looked at a lot of those key themes and I said actually that summarises what we've been living in for the last 5 years in terms of major disruption to our world down in Christchurch. And how many of you sitting in the audience today are from Christchurch? Just a quick. So a lot of you will know what we're talking about because we've lived in it, we've worked in it and we've experienced it. And both Rachel and I, whilst we work for IAG, we're also customers of IAG. Rachel is a major rebuild and I'm a major repair, and I'm sure some of your others are in the same sort of situation as well. So all of these words also describe living and working in one of the, I think, New Zealand's biggest natural disaster, where we had 5 major earthquake events, and to date I think we've now had over 13,000 aftershocks. So that's the sort of world that we're living in every day, and it's a very disruptive world. And so we've had to respond differently to that disruptive world. And digital transformation is about disruption. I mean, if you think about Airbnb, if you think about Uber, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, they're all disruptions to business as we know it today. And business to our BAU landscape. Now what we had to do with Canterbury Recovery and what IAG recognised pretty early on was that our business as usual processes, our business as usual systems, our business as usual ways of working just weren't going to cut it in terms of how we would respond to these major events. So what Canterbury Recovery did was, or what IAG did was, if you imagine that's our business, was we created this unit called Canterbury Recovery, and we ring-fenced that unit. So whilst it still sat within the wider IAG business, we were given permission to do things differently because actually we had to. We had to think differently, we had to act differently, we had to perform differently. And we had to come up with new ideas. We didn't know a lot of what we didn't know. You know, we live in an ever-changing landscape down there. New issues, new problems, new challenges were arising all the time. So, you know, your common and standard ways of working just don't fit the bill there. So we were lucky, I guess. We had the opportunity to be different, but that's very challenging as well. So what Rachel and I are going to talk about this morning is we're going to talk about four key areas. One is urgency. Another one is leadership required. And I'm going to talk about these two. And then Rachel's going to talk about teamwork and partnership. And then she's also going to talk about tool sets. And if you can read my writing, you're probably doing well. So these are four areas that we felt were important in terms of what we needed to do to deliver. So as Will said, I'm program manager for Canterbury Recovery. So I have responsibility for risk, I have responsibility for governance, I have responsibility for project management, data, reporting and systems. And this was the challenge that we faced. Oh, okay. How about I go that way? That might help. IAG is a major insurance provider. We have about 30% of the market, and we were faced with over 87,000 claims. Now that ranges from major repair and rebuild claims to contents claims. As you can see, our share of the market is 10,000 repairs and rebuilds. We haven't physically repaired and rebuilt all of those houses, but we have cash settled, what we call cash settled a number, including Will's house. I've just cash settled my major repair, but Rachel is rebuilding her house and is going through that right at the moment. So you imagine 10,000 households. So the scale of this is huge. So we're responsible for a $6 billion program of work. So again, that's the scale of what we're faced with. We've got 2,700 to go. That's major repairs and rebuilds to go. And we've concurrently got in construction 1,200 houses. Now, our business strategy was that we needed to get people back in their homes as quickly as possible. And I know all of you are probably sitting here and saying, it's 5 years on Friday. The 4th of September 2010 was when the first earthquake hit, and it's 5 years on Friday. Why has it taken so long? And that's the question that we ask ourselves as well. How can we go faster? But when you're dealing with numbers like that, and when you're dealing with, you know, hundreds of thousands of impacted people, that's why it takes so long. Shared properties is an interesting one. We'll talk a little bit around partnership. Rachel will talk around partnership and teamwork and collaboration. Shared property has meant that our industry, and if you imagine the insurance industry, we're very risk averse, we're very conservative, and we don't actually like to talk to the other insurance companies that much because our IP is very critical to us. But with shared property, we've actually had to form a new way of collaboration, because a shared property might mean that there are, say, 6 units in a block, and every single unit is insured by a different insurance company. And one's a repair, another one's a rebuild, another one's sitting with minor repairs required. How do you coordinate getting people, all of those people back in their houses? So those were some of the challenges that we've faced. So what did we do in response to that? Well, this is a sort of mess that we've had to deal with. You know, this is probably a common image that you've seen over the years. And when I walked into Canterbury Recovery in February 2013, I took one look at our systems, and we had spreadsheets, we had thousands of spreadsheets, we had Access databases, we had legacy systems, we had another system that we were using. We just cobbled it all together because we had to make do. We were acting out of urgency, and we just had to get stuff done, and we had to do it quickly. And I walked in and I said, from a program perspective, because I have an IT background, this just is not going to get us home. This is not going to tell us where we're at. You know, we've got 15 different versions of the truth. You know, I've got some numbers that say we've got 10,000 repairs and rebuilds. Someone else said we've got 8. Someone else said, well, no, we've got 9. Actually, we didn't actually know how many we had. So what we did was that we embarked on a project to actually create what we called a single source of truth. And we decided that we didn't have time to modify existing systems. We didn't have time to build an application. We went to the cloud and we looked for a platform. Now, IAG, very, very conservative. A cloud platform was unheard of in our business. But what we did was we said, hey, you know, we've got to do things differently and we need to implement something quickly. We've got to get value out to our business. So when I talked before about innovation, a new idea that creates business value, we didn't have 12, 18 months, 2 years time to deliver something. We had to deliver something within 3 months. In fact, could we deliver something now? Because we need to have certainty on our numbers and know how many customers we've got and know exactly what we've got to deliver on. So that's how Hivers was birthed, so to speak. And as if we didn't have enough to do, I said, we need to actually start again. And we need to get rid of all of these systems and we need to have one single source of truth and we need to have one view of the data. So this is what we built. And this is a screenshot of a repair. Now, the information's been changed, but this, a rebuild. This is a screenshot of a rebuild. Now, what we did was that we took thin slices of functionality and we started off with one pilot and we built an end-to-end process around repairs first. Oh, and I've just, sorry, that's me, I always do this. Let me just click back. And we delivered value within 3 months. Then the next urgent need was another piece of functionality. So we delivered that. Then we delivered a piece of functionality over here. Then we delivered another piece along here. So we pieced it together and we kept, from a leadership team perspective of whom I'm part of, I would keep going back to the leadership team and saying, what's our next imperative that we need to deliver to? What does that look like? And then I would go back to the project team that had been formed and was led by Rachel and said, we now need to deliver this piece of functionality. So little by little, we pieced this application together. We had an overall vision. We knew roughly where we were going, but we knew that the requirements were going to change. And halfway through one piece of development, I went to a leadership team meeting. An urgent need had arisen. I went back to Rachel and I said, stop everything. In fact, our whole team is going to focus in this one area. And we ran a workshop, we gathered the requirements with our business, and then we built the functionality and we delivered it and we trained 100 users in under 3 weeks. And we stopped everything else and we delivered. And that was what we were asked to do and continually challenged to do. Now the project and the project team sits within Canterbury Recovery. It doesn't sit outside of it, it doesn't sit in IT. I brought everyone into our business. So it sits here. And that's been absolutely critical because our team has sat amongst the users and worked with our users constantly, and it's kept both sides of the equation honest. Because if our users didn't like something that our team delivered, they were standing next to their desk telling them. And if our team didn't know the answer to a question, they would go and stand next to one of the subject matter experts and ask them the answer to the question and get an instant response. So there was instant communication. This application is not particularly sexy. It's not particularly exciting, but it does the job, and it only needs to be around for a couple of years. And everyone's using it constantly. We have over 600 users up and down the country using it because not everyone's based in Christchurch. We've got a range of different users, and it does something for everyone. And I guess one of the comments that I wanted to make was around urgency. There was always a sense of urgency for us because you just actually needed to walk outside our door to see why we had a sense of urgency. That image that I showed you previously, That's why we have a sense of urgency. And parts of our city still look like that. So how were we able to do this? Well, I think, again, if I go back to the whole digital transformation, this is a really interesting article that I came across from Gartner, and it talks about flipping your mindset. And we heard a presentation earlier around mindsets, and this is about flipping the mindset. And this is a real challenge to our business around how we think. And there's three components to that. There's the whole information and technology leadership. You know, if you think about it, everyone's so invested in our legacy systems. You know, we've put SAP in and we've spent so much money on it. We need to keep investing on it. But actually, why? If it's already delivered the value, then we need to look for new value and new ways of delivering. Just because it's been there and we've always invested in it, why do we need to keep investing in it? Why don't we actually invest in change and doing something different? And that's what we had to do. We couldn't invest in our legacy systems because they just weren't going to get us there in time. So we took a different mindset. In terms of our leadership, we constantly challenged ourselves, and I constantly challenged the team, and the rest of my leadership team, of which there are 7, and they're very vocal and they're very challenging, challenged me in terms of what am I delivering in terms of value. And at any time, we could have stopped and said that's good enough. And in fact, we've got to that stage now where we've delivered 24 releases in 16 months. And we haven't delivered anything for the last 3 months because we don't need to anymore. We've got the value out of what we've delivered, and we've got enough to help us to bring our program home. The people leadership side, and Rachel's going to talk a little bit more around that. And I really like that when doing something new or uncertain, vision is the only roadmap and inspiration the only fuel. And we talked constantly about our vision and what we were trying to achieve. We didn't have a lot of documentation, we didn't write a business case. When you've got a $6 billion program of work to deliver to, you know that whatever you're going to do is going to make a difference. And sometimes, and I think just coming back to that value leadership, rather than doing your business cases and your cost-benefit analysis and your justifications, because it's all around cost, actually this is around delivering value and how do you best deliver that value. And sometimes you've actually just got to have a bit of faith. And sometimes the business has got to have a bit of faith, but you've got to build that trust up. And Rachel will talk a little bit about how we went ahead and built that trust, because as everyone knows, when you're delivering applications, our users think they only get one bite of the cherry. And so they want everything in it, every single feature, no matter the value or not, because they think they're never going to get another opportunity. And our users were like that too. And they just kept saying, but we need this and we need this and we need this. And a couple of times they said, unless we have this, there's no point in putting this functionality in. So I would go, so you're saying to me that we've spent, this time and money already, but this one feature is actually worth more than anything else that we've got in there. And then when we put it like that, they said, oh, well, yeah, maybe you can put it in, and then can you add that piece later? And when we started to do that, and in some cases, I remember we put some functionality in and the users looked at it and they went, nah, actually we don't really like that. We think we got that wrong. What are we going to do? And we said, okay, tell us what your changes are. And within 2 weeks we've made those changes. And they said, yep, this really works for us. And in fact, we all know our users don't always know what they need. And so sometimes we would say, actually guys, we're all arguing on this. Milestones was a classic example of, as we would go through the build process, we would have milestones. That was a classic example. We thought we knew what we wanted on it. We rolled something out, and they looked at it and they said, yeah, we haven't quite got it right. But the beauty of our approach was that we could go back and change it. And we built that trust and we built that faith. And after a while, our users were like, yeah, let's just get it out. Let's just get us using it. And once we've used it, we might come back to you with some changes or not. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Rachel, and she's going to talk a little bit more around our teamwork and partnership and the tool sets that we used. So, and then I'm just going to come back and I'll wrap up again at the end.
Great, thanks. We only have one mobile mic, so I'll be here for the duration. Thanks, Jenny. So my mandate was clear: get a new system in as quickly as possible and replace the existing system. So no mean feat. What this involved was 4 key elements that I want to focus on today. Obviously, this is a lot bigger than what we have time to talk about today. So what I want to focus on is the criticality of partnerships, of teamwork, what that actually looks like when the rubber meets the road. And I want to talk about something I've called minimum viable artefacts and fit for purpose tools. So in terms of our partnerships, we had an external construction company with over 100 people. They were based in Christchurch with offices in Auckland. We had a vendor, a new vendor, with offices in Christchurch, Sydney and the Gold Coast. And we had our internal operations, so that was IAG across the country, with offices in Auckland, Hamilton and Christchurch primarily. So what did building those partnerships look like for us? That was me engaging with parts of the business like security. We were entering into a new domain, so that was cloud. How were we going to be able to fly this product with real users if we hadn't met our security requirements? They were very rigid, and it proved really valuable to engage with them early on because we quickly found out that we needed single sign-on before we could release it widely throughout the organisation. So we embarked on a pilot with just a small group of people, which gave us time to get a copy of the data set from the existing system over, and we had the team furiously working away on getting the single sign-on technical elements in place, all lined up, ready, so that when we had our first release, we could release it securely, satisfying IAG's requirements. We also had our new vendor. So the way we made this project work was we recognised that we were going to need to work really closely together. So any of you who've ever worked with a vendor, anybody here ever worked with an external vendor? Yeah. So we had to bring them into our business unit. So Jenny's drawn on that diagram there. The project team was sitting within the business. We brought the vendor into the project team, so they became an integral part of our project team, which meant that they were privy to conversations. We shared warts and all the positives and the negatives. They got to hear firsthand the feedback from our user base, and sometimes that wasn't very pretty, but it was really good for them to hear that because they could make real change based on that feedback. We also needed to build the team. So we did that in a piecemeal fashion, just as we needed certain skill sets, we brought them on board. For example, we brought in a data modeler so that he could re-architect the data model because our current systems weren't geared up to cater for the myriad scenarios that we were encountering in this complex environment. He worked closely with our vendor so that we could actually get this data model implemented as a foundational element in the architecture of this new solution. This is while we're still maintaining an existing system and keeping our user base satisfied with the changes that were needing to be made to that while spinning up this new piece of work. So the key to all of this, and I think these pictures really say it all, is we learnt to nurture the vision and nurture the team, and we worked together collaboratively. That meant we had to be real. So what does real actually mean? When the rubber meets the road and you don't know something, but it's critical for the project to succeed, do you be silent? Do you say something? Do you walk away? Do you make your teammate look terrible so that you can look good? What do you do? We made sure that we built respect and trust with the team so that we could really forge the strength needed to face all of the uncertainty and the complexity that was ahead of us. So what did this team look like? Many of you will have seen this from Lisa Adkins' Coaching Agile Teams book. This is a wonderful metaphor that perfectly describes what a high-performing team needs to be to deliver under pressure in short space of time. So at the bottom there you'll see the roots that Lisa talks about. So these are the values of the team, and I'll just highlight one there, commitment. It was absolutely imperative that every single person in the team was committed, whatever that meant. If you've heard of pigs and chickens, it meant skin in the game. So everybody had to be trusted and relied upon to deliver results. Jenny needed that for assurance for the executive leadership team, and we needed that for ourselves so that we knew what we could deliver. In the middle you'll see these are the traits of the team, and what we encouraged was this divergent and convergent thinking. So people would bring whatever their views were to the table. We didn't know the solution when we walked into a room oftentimes, so we had to brainstorm for that, taking the best minds in the room, pooling that information, and then working out together what our approach would be. And it typically wasn't what we entered the room with. And once you get a team working in that fashion where they feel like they're really adding value, where they're given permission to do these things that many times organisations just pay lip service to, they actually thrived on the challenge, which is an unusual thing to experience. I was averse to lots of constant change when I first joined the team. I wanted everything predictable and all lined up. But by the end of it, we were really excited by the fact that we had change coming at us constantly, all the time, because it stretched us, it extended us, it made us look outside the square, which is where we typically are in BAU, which is not always good for the business. I talked before about a minimum viable artefact. This is one that I found really, really useful. So what I did was I thought, my project management background, plans everywhere, diagrams everywhere, governance meetings and all these things that I had to be involved in, and I thought, no, this isn't actually going to get us there. What's going to get us there is something that's visual, so it's quite handy that we've just come from that previous session where it's very visual. We used visual tools because they said a lot. Jenny could take this diagram here to the executive team. She could say, this is what the near horizon looks like. This is where our projected delivery dates might be. These are the user groups, these little triangles here that we're going to be releasing to. Our training and change people could come along and anticipate what training would need to be done, and they could get their preparations in process while we were developing. So this was a very valuable tool. We also took this to our meetings with our vendor, so he could anticipate what resourcing he might need to put in place to cope with the change and the emerging requirements that were coming, and it just became a really valuable part of our process. The tool set that we chose was a product called Linkit. Anybody heard of Linkit? It's rated, just one of you, it's rated as one of the top 3 Agile tools in the world at the moment. The reason, this is not a plug for Linkit, by the way, this is just to show you, in the circumstances and the context that we found ourselves in, we needed transparency, we needed visibility, we needed a way of all of our geographically dispersed teams to see exactly what was going on in the project. So, if we had a physical board, we'd have to take a photograph of it, the story. So we needed something that was in the cloud that anybody could access anytime, and this tool provided that for us. So what we did in the beginning was we just thought, well, we'll start basic. We know we're developing based on our feature sets, so let's just put a feature up there, track it through, see what we can learn, our inspect and adapt, and then modify it. So over the course of time, we modified the system, easily customizable, and it really did suit our needs. Another benefit of having a tool like this meant that Jenny could jump in, add items to the backlog, which you'll see just along here. So that was our backlog. This was our feature set. You can see it's all in the ready column. You can see various symbols on it. Some of these represent what was currently blocked and that needed to be unblocked, and tracking them across the development. Also, our vendor would jump in here with his development team, and they would develop the product based on what we were using in this tool. We also used it for release management, so we could do all of our smoke testing on here, put the bugs in the system, and the vendor would fix them, and we would have immediate notification to say that they were fixed and could be retested. And we did this all remotely. None of this was co-located. Everybody was doing this either from home or from their office. So put a challenge out there to you. Those of you who prefer co-location, I've got a very strong case to say that you can actually deliver huge value to your business by just simply catering to the needs of your team. We had people who needed to work from home from time to time, you know, inspectors coming into their houses and things like that. So we didn't have a normal sort of work situation. So it can be done. This slide here just shows you a little bit more detail. So the thing we were interested in was we wanted to cut down the noise. So the way we did that was all the comments related to a particular user story or task could be captured inside that particular item. And it meant we could see straight away who was working on it, all colour-coded, nice graphics, so that it saved time when people were interacting with it. And we could see a history of everything that had happened, every single decision that had been made around that user story. So when the business came back to us and said, no, that's not what we wanted, we could say, well, actually, this is what was originally scoped. So we had evidence of all those decisions, which was really important for us in developing this product. So with the tools, the right tool set, just enough, just in time to get us there, and the right artefacts, not a whole bunch of artefacts for the sake of doing artefacts. As Jenny said, we delivered 24 releases in just 16 months. The pace was formidable, but it was sustainable. The team loved it. They excelled at it. And now they've all gone on to other projects, but they all say, you know, we want more of that. We'd really like that in BAU. So it is possible to achieve extraordinary results if you have a sense of urgency. And I'm going to pass back to Jenny now, and she's just going to throw a little challenge out there for you.
So I just want to come back quickly to a couple of things. Let's come back. And I have to say, as Rachel said, this was our plan on a page. We got to version, I think, 24, 26 of it, and in some weeks it changed 2 or 3 times depending on the priorities, the business priorities. And those business priorities did keep changing. Sometimes because that was within our control, but sometimes it was, you know, externally. Something would come up, you know, at one stage there was some decisions made around land zoning, and then you know, at another stage there might have been decisions made within the industry and with EQC and SERA around shared property, and suddenly that would become the priority. So this just kept changing, and it became a bit of a joke really with our vendor, because we'd go to a meeting with our vendor and go, well, we've got a new version for you, and we might have seen them 2 days previously. So really valuable tool. I just want to come back briefly to what we delivered, and from low vis to high vis, because when we started this project we had low visibility of our data, of our customers, of our properties, of the land. And you know, I talked a little bit, mentioned about data-driven big data and data analytics. This response, you know, our recovery is all based around data, understanding our customer, understanding properties, the foundation, land issues, you know, understanding who has a shared driveway. I mean, before the earthquake, we didn't know that we had, you know, our customers might have had a shared driveway or 13 retaining walls. You know, that sort of information, we never captured that when we actually wrote an insurance policy. We know a huge amount about our customers, about their properties, about the land now, and that's going to be really critical in the future. But this was, as I said, it's not a sexy application. We didn't gold plate it. Our executive general manager kept saying to me, just please don't boil the ocean. It just needs to be good enough. And it wasn't about perfection. And that can be a challenge in your teams because everyone wants to do their best work. And so it's actually about reframing what that best work needs to look like. Sometimes it is just good enough to go. And as I said, this application, our program finishes sometime next year. We're not going to need this application perhaps past the end of next year. We're going to need the data. The data is critical. And in digital transformation, and in the masterclass that I went to last week, big data and the value of that data was something that's going to be really critical in the future. And for us, it's going to be really critical as well. So what I want to do now is just really put out a challenge because we've talked a bit about urgency, leadership, teamwork and partnership and tool sets. And I guess, you know, we had to do this. This was an imperative. I didn't really have a choice. You know, I would rather not have replaced all our systems. That's not what, you know, I was brought in to do as program manager. But actually, the only way that I could see that we could bring our program home and get our people back in their houses was for us to have the right systems and the right data and the right visibility. So this was about being able to track progress, to understand performance, to be able to communicate more effectively with our customers, to be able to communicate more effectively with our partners. And that was what high vis or high visibility was all about. And we actually ran a competition within our business, within our team. And we're now up to, we started off with a strategic team, and as we grew, we became a lot more operational. We brought claims people in and loss adjusters and engineers and quantity surveyors and builders, etc. And we're now up at over 600 people. And we ran a competition, and that's where we got high vis out of. So we asked our people what it meant to them, and that's what they came back with, and that's where we got high vis from. And so I guess the challenge really for all of us is that we've proved that out of urgency can come innovation, and that you can actually change the whole landscape, and you can do things differently. And I think we all have to challenge ourselves, and we're challenging ourselves even within IAG. And interestingly enough, IAG Group has now set up a digital transformation unit, and cloud was the first application. Our high-vis application was the first cloud application, but now we're looking to roll out other applications in that sort of space because we recognise that digital transformation is the way to go. And I think there's a lot of businesses out there that unless we do something ourselves, we're going to get it done to us. So we're going to have other businesses come in from the side. And insurance, finance, you know, other banking, if any of you are from any of the banks, you know, there's real challenges out there to traditional business, and I think we've got to really think differently. So really our challenge to you is, you know, how are you going to create innovation? You know, how are you going to get that sense of urgency in your business? How are you going to foster teamwork and partnership? How are you going to ensure that the right leadership is in place? And that is all of our responsibility. It's not just me as a leader, it's everyone. I mean, Rachel and her team constantly challenged me, and I constantly challenge my leadership team. And, you know, what tool sets are you going to need to take you forward? So if we've left you with some of those messages, and we've left you with, you know, a real live, living example that it is possible, you know, and it's not just, oh, well, you know, this is theory, but actually it would never happen. Well, when I started 2.5 years ago, some of my team, some of my users said to me, it'll never happen, you'll never deliver this. And we're proof that you can do it. So on that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and if you've got any questions, please fire away.
questions, we can beat me to it. Excellent talk, and I personally really appreciate the urgency component. A nice one, throwing it back to everybody here to create that. What advice would you give for those people who are going back to projects where urgency is missing? Because it is an incredibly powerful component to getting things done. So in your experience, what would you do?
Well, in my experience, because I've sat on both sides, I've sat on the business side, I sit on the business side, I am the business, I'm the program manager, I'm the product owner for Hivers. The key thing is business engagement. And I think if you don't have that engagement by your business, I think you're on a hiding to nothing. I heard about a project at the weekend that's happening up here, Agile approach. The project team sits in another building from the business. They have 2 SMEs, subject matter experts on the project. The product owner is a consultant that's been brought in. So what does that tell you? There's no business buy-in. And I really think unless you've got that, you need to go, stop, we shouldn't be doing this. Because actually we don't know what value we're going to deliver, because our business doesn't know what value they need. It's a bold call, but you know, the number of projects I've seen where the business have just not been engaged and they've just not gone well. And I mean, as far back, and some of you might know and remember INSYS, you know, and we've had NovaPay. Where's the business engagement? Where's the user engagement in that case? Where's the customer engagement? So I think that's critical.
Thank you. Okay, next question.
Just picking up on your point about customer engagement, how did you make sure, because you pretty much summed up that you took the role of talking to the leadership and the teams in-house and sitting with the SMEs and whatnot.
Yeah.
So what about the 10,000 customers? How did you make sure that they were?
So we really, most of our work was in, if you like, internal customers. So it was all of our users who are actually delivering to our external customers like me, like Rachel. Our external customers would see the benefit from, we would have the information in front of us that we were able to, you know, talk to them about. So a lot of our communication is personal communication over the phone. So really it was the internal, I guess our internal customers.
So I guess just trying to put a tangible spin on it, your customers would be processed quicker?
Yes. Yeah, and have
as a result of whatever you've done
they
inside.
should be. They should understand more clearly, you know, where they're at in the process when they're having conversations with their claims case managers. The information that we're giving them is more accurate and more current and up to date. And everyone is able to look at that information. So whether it's our rebuild partner, whether it was a claims case manager or a loss adjuster, or whether it was an engineer who might be going out to talk to them, it was that single source of truth, one view of the data, whereas at the time, you know, we had multiple views of the data and we weren't able to actually really know what information was being provided to our customers. So that was some of the benefit. Now, I'm not saying we've got this absolutely right and that it's absolutely perfect, because it's not. We all know that. But it's, you know, it's been a huge exercise, and we'd all have liked to have done it better, but we've had to just, you know, work with what we've got and do the best job that we could.
Thank you.
You had a slide there where you showed that your project plan changed many times, and I think we're all familiar with that.
Yeah.
I was wondering how you communicated that to the team.
To our project team?
To the project team, and how the team handled it.
Yeah. Answer that one.
The constant change, that is.
Yeah, the constant change. Initially, it was really hard. Initially, it was like, no, not another change. And we all felt like that. But we just trusted the process. We just got used to the idea of change, of emerging requirements. You actually do get used to it after a while. It's a bit like an earthquake. The first one's really, really terrifying. Oh, and then there's a 5.8 and you think, oh, that's nothing, you know? But it is like that. And the team just came on the journey with us. They knew, they were committed to it, and we were totally open about everything. We didn't have any surprises. We had a rule of no surprises. Everything was transparent, from the CEO, you know, right down to the last person in the team. Does that answer your question?
It does to a certain degree. We've
Yeah.
got a similar problem, but our change is constant, and I think people are accepting it, but it can be a bit demoralising. I think they realise that the change will be constant, and that
Sure.
that can be the disheartening thing.
I think as well, I mean, we also said, you know, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake, it's okay. And, you know, if we're going to fail, we'll fail early on something, and, you know, we'll just keep improving. And so it really was a safe environment as well. And people didn't feel scared to speak out. So, you know, if they had an issue, they could come speak to me. If they, you know, they could go and speak to our executive general manager, Dean, who leads our team. It's very open. The whole leadership team are really open. So I think it's also building that trust in all of us as well.
And just to add to that, it wasn't like the example that Jenny used happened all the time where the project was stopped. We were developing to feature sets. So there was, reprioritisation within that. So it was relatively controlled. And we knew on the near horizon where we were going and where we needed to get to. But we did need to take a fresh look at it every time we had new information that would change what value we needed to deliver to the business.
I think the other thing that we did was that we really tight team. I mean, Rachel worked really hard at building that trust and really encouraging our team to thrive. And we ran layers of protection. So there's a lot of noise that was going on that I would get hit with that I would just not, you know, Rachel wouldn't know, and nor would the team. And at times, I mean, there were some pretty strong challenges to what we were doing. And there were a number of barriers that we had to work around. But we sort of protected and let people just get on with it. But we also kept an eye on our team so that if we felt like one of them needed a bit of a break, we'd sort of sub them out and say, look, you know, go off and have a week off, because lots of things, you know, life happens and people do get a bit worn out, and maybe it's because of all the change, or maybe it's because there's something else going on in their lives. So it was also about really caring for our team as well, and just, you know, making sure, because we had to keep sustaining this. So, you know, you've got to have that pace that keeps going forever, really. So you've got to, you know, really look out for your people.
We've got time for one more.
You've talked about a team, but how was the team sort of structured? Like, I'm assuming there's more than one team, was there? Or
we did have one team in IAG. It was a 9-person team based on a Kanban sort of a model. And we just simply hired the skills that we needed, and then people would pick up in a truly cross-functional way other pieces of work that needed to be done. So we had some developers, solution architect, data modeler, BA, process analyst, trainer, testers, all that sort of thing, and we would supplement that with our vendor. So the vendor was able to provide some skill into the team, but really the small size of the team enabled us to go fast. Yep.
Okay.